eBay Motors and ADVRider.com welcome you to episode 67 of The Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham, and I may be suffering from a degree of heat stroke, so be kind. This week, I speak to motorcycle designer and industry pundit Michael Uhlarik from Motorcycle Global. We discuss, among other things, the best-selling motorcycles in America and why marketers have failed the brands that they represent. But before we take the leap, some words from our sponsor. Picture this, you're halfway through a DIY motorcycle fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. Well, it's okay because whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything. Brake rotors, lights, and tire exhaust systems, whatever you need. And it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Michael, we've talked about everything else over the years, so let's talk motorcycle sales in America. And what's going on there. And you've got some interesting numbers that you managed to procure.
Yeah, I did. And I should probably call those up. Sorry.
Well, since we're trying to seem like we're, capable of speaking intelligently.
All right.
And the winner is
Honda CRF 300L.
Is the best-selling motorcycle in America. Now, are there caveats with that over a certain displacement or?
No. So I think it's important for people who don't know these things. In most of the world, in almost every country, developed and undeveloped or developing, motor vehicle sales are monitored by some kind of government agency. And then there's the US and the UK, where it is monitored and accounted by a vehicle manufacturer association. So right away, there's a sort of walled garden around US motorcycle sales, which generally doesn't exist anywhere else. So getting US motorcycle sales requires spending an obscene amount of money to basically pay the manufacturers to tell you what they sold. Now, there are other ways to find this data. But I just want that to be understood, because if you're someone who's wondering, well, how come we don't see these numbers all the time? That's the reason. So
if I can just jump in, sorry to jump in here, but I remember seeing I think it was an Australian motorcycle news magazine, and inside the cover in every issue, they had by brand and model sales for that quarter or whatever it was, just as correct sort of public information.
And it is Germany, Italy, Spain, France, China, even, that paragon of transparency. You can go on, if you know where to go. It's not clandestine. You don't need to sign up. You don't need to pay anything. All the Southeast Asian countries, you can go to the, and see model name, sales volume, top 10, top 20, sometimes all down to like single digits. And it's wonderful. It allows us in this business to make, decisions intelligently. Now, I don't want to get an angry letter from the Motorcycle Industry Council saying that, because they're like, you are not allowed to publish this stuff.
Do you have to sign an NDA to get these things?
You have to agree to their terms, which I'll just leave it there. And so this information for 2024 is public. Somebody put it out there, and so you can look this up. So 2024, the last full calendar year, the best-selling motorcycle, to answer your question, on road, any capacity, any size, any engine type, was the Honda CRF 300L.
Now, when you say on road, you just mean something that can be licensed for road use.
Illegal. Yeah.
Right.
So, and I think why that's important. Well, it's a bunch of things, because the next bike, number 2, is a Harley-Davidson Street Glide. And then number 3 is a Honda Rebel 500. Then the Yamaha MT-07. Then there's another Harley, and then the Ninja 400, the Suzuki DRZ 400, another Harley, and then a couple of expensive Euro bikes, the GS and the Panigale. What this really shows is that by volume and by price, Americans are buying really inexpensive, affordable, small displacement motorcycles more than anything else. Like, about half of on-road sales are bikes under 500cc bikes with 30, 35 horsepower. If I include the MT-07, it's bikes under 80 horsepower, but let's leave that out. Let's just talk 300, 400, 500 cc motorcycles. These are bikes that have an average price. I averaged them out, those in the top 10, less than $7,000. So what that tells me, I mean, I have access to all the sales data going back about 15 years. So what I can tell you, what manufacturers know, is that this trope that Americans don't like small motorcycles, or that dealers say, you sometimes hear there's this hearsay like, oh, well, they're not good enough for around here. America's too big. The roads are too fast. It's bullshit. Americans love small motorcycles. They love inexpensive motorcycles. They are buying a lot of them. And the last thing I'll add to this, opening bit is that this data does not include off-road motorcycles, which almost all of them are under 500 cc. So really, Americans, 3/4 of American motorcycle sales are small, light bikes that are under 350 pounds, maybe barely touching 400 pounds, bikes that are inexpensive, bikes that are single or at most 2-cylinder, that have low horsepower and high fun. And that the other side of the market, overwhelmingly, are motorcycles well into $20,000+, very large, very heavy, very high performance, boutique products. And there seems to be almost no middle ground.
The Lowdown Show is presented by adbrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. Well, based on what you said, it seems to be reflective of what's going on in our culture at all, which is that we have a culture of haves and have-nots. And although maybe that's an oversimplification, but certainly, we've been told, and manufacturers will tell you, they'll say there's at least in Canada, and I'm sure it's similar in America, that there's a price threshold. In Canada, it's $10,000. In the US, it's probably $7,500, where that's the point beyond which it's extremely difficult to sell a motorcycle, certainly to anyone young. So who is buying the expensive bikes? I mean, is there a demographic that goes with that?
So no, there isn't hard data about who buys these things. But we do focus groups, and we know, everyone knows anecdotally. When you see someone on a Ducati Panigale, once in a while it's some hero 24-year-old who's just sunk all their money into this, $27,000 motorcycle. Most of the time it's a middle-aged guy. And the Harley customer is well over 50 by average. There's talk among OEMs of purveyors of luxury brands, the legacy brands, Harley, BMW, Ducati, Triumph. Oh, we're reaching out to young clientele. That's the original intent, and that sounds really good for shareholders, but the outcome in the US has not reflected that. Ducati launched the Scrambler Icon in 2011, and I liked it. It was a back to basics, air cooled, simple, low horsepower motorcycle, low power, lower cost, high fun. And of course, we all remember the Scrambler by Ducati campaign, and even the way they're presented on the website today. It's always on a beach, and there are these boho hippie, 25-year-old men and women, and they're just so free, and they're all so young. That's not who buys the Scrambler. Most of Scrambler sales are middle-aged guys, because they love the 70s throwback, and they've got the disposable income. And the Scrambler Icon, the basic model, is dwindling in favor of the big engined, liquid cooled, higher output, because that's what happens. I love this. If only it had more power. And in the automotive world, we've seen this too. Toyota once had a brand aimed at youth, Scion, and they were a bunch of Japan domestic market models brought to the US and Canada with this new brand, and they had this ad campaign of personalization. It's all these young people. Well, who bought it? It was boomers, because they were like, this is the kind of car my son or daughter would love. And then they ended up driving the XB themselves, and the son or daughter ended up getting their own car, which was like, if they were into cars, a 6-year-old BMW 3 Series. And if they weren't into cars, whatever. So this whole thing where we market to youth, but not really, is reflected in these numbers. Who's buying who bought 13,000 Honda Rebel 500s? People in their 30s and 40s. Some people much older than that. Yeah, some youth, for sure. Who's buying the CRF 300L? I have it on good authority from a major regional distributor, in the Southwestern United States. It's a lot of older guys returning to dirt biking after 10, 15 years away. And the Honda's a safe choice. It's kind of comfortable. It's kind of soft. They can go off-road, but not too much. And then they can drive it to the trailhead and drive it home. And come on, it's $5,500 US. You can't lose.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting when you're talking about the Scrambler and the Scrambler Marketing. And I remember writing a piece about that. And everything was backlit. And you could see the sand in the air. It was beautiful. I wonder if actually if as opposed to that youth marketing reaching the youth, but if that youthful marketing was just, for people of my age, it was just like, oh God, I wish I could go back again. I wonder if that was actually the inadvertent, or maybe it's not inadvertent, but the appeal of that pitch.
I think there's a little bit of that, but that's too clever. I'm going to say something maybe a borderline unprofessional.
And from you?
I try and keep it professional. Strong opinions, yes. Polite and respectful. Always.
All right. What's your unprofessional opinion?
I haven't met too many people in motorcycle marketing that knew what they were doing. They knew how to market things. They knew how to make ads. They knew how to execute complex, really effective marketing campaigns.
But Michael, they can dovetail synergies.
Solution. Yes, they know all the spin. And look, it's hard. Marketing is difficult. It's not easy. It's not just you take a dump truck full of money and you've got to find good creative people to do the creative work, the graphic design, the sub-brand work, things like labels and typography and templates. And then you've got to do the photography, the videography, you got to do casting, you got to get the tone right. That's all hard. And then never mind organizationally, it is hard. It is hard. And it's a crowded marketing space. We know this. We're all being bombarded by ads. That said, just because you're good at marketing doesn't mean you're good at marketing motorcycles. And that's my point. Amazing professionals, really hardworking, really skilled, not getting the product. This is not an iPhone. I don't want to go to a mall, to a store that's minimal and white and has like some rip-off Eames chair and some guy come up to me and tell me, how it's basically a computer on wheels, because that's a stereotype we keep hearing. We don't want to see another mood board of hippie, boho young people on a beach, because nobody rides a motorcycle on a beach.
Because the sand destroys the chain.
That too. Can we just be honest and talk and market to people about motorcycles the way they actually will use them? And, the best ad campaigns I've seen in the last 10 years are all from India. Which, doesn't help.
What are they doing? What are they addressing in a way that it's not happening in the West?
Normal shit. Like, sometimes they're fun and cheeky and sometimes the jokes are lame. Okay, sure. But, they're increasingly just showing, there's the stereotype ones too, where there's like the guitar rock and, some clearly cast for their appearance, cool dude doing some incredibly cringy stuff. That exists too. But there are real gem campaigns in India, which are showing people, idealized, but people doing motorcycle things on their motorcycles that are promoting the virtue of a brand or of a particular model that actually makes sense. Like, this vehicle has the longest range in its class, and it shows a person going from shop to school to another shop to drop off to like, and you're like, yeah, this person, this target customer cares about range because they're a delivery guy. Or, this person is riding out, with their family because families ride on motorcycles there. And I'm not saying we have to do that here, but, every ad campaign here is just another stereotype of, extreme and some guy, doing giant rooster tails on his dirt bike in slow motion. Like, okay, some of us do that, but you know what? I've never seen a Honda CRF ridden like that. And that's the best selling motorcycle in America. The people who are buying that are actually just having fun. And I don't think that has to be unexciting. You can make great copy. You can write great ads. You can make great Instagram stories around cool, interesting, real people doing cool and interesting things on a CRF or on an MT-07, or for that matter, on a road glide that isn't a desert highway in Utah, and a 1950s diner. Like, that's what I mean by there's just such a lack of original thinking in the marketing. And this data shows that the marketing has zero effect. The Ninja 400 is the 6th best-selling bike in America last year. Have you seen a Ninja ad?
Let's take a short break and listen to a few words provided by our sponsor. Picture this. You're in the garage, your favorite room in the house, and you're tuning up your engine with parts that you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease. And because you're committed to riding that thing farther than the odometer can even handle, you start thinking to yourself, you know what? I could probably also use some new brakes, a shock. This baby deserves a new air filter. So you head straight back to eBay. You can find anything you need there. It's unreal. From headlights to air filters to exhaust systems, all the way to those carbon fiber rims you've been fantasizing about. eBay is the stocked garage of your dreams. And now you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. Because eBay knows DIY fixes can be major and mods, well, they're intense. So you need to know those parts are guaranteed to fit every time before you dive in. Wrench first. And on the off chance you order a part and it doesn't fit, send it back. Simple as that. You know what you love more than life itself, and that's, of course, riding your motorcycle. You're serious when it comes to engine maintenance and locked in when you're headed into a build. And that's exactly why you start with eBay. Minor fixer, complete overhaul. You want to get your ride back in the road, and now you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. So eBay created My Garage, where all you have to do is add your ride's info to get the exact parts that fit. When you see that green check, you're a click away from that part clicking perfectly into place. Well, now that you know all this, just imagine standing at that open garage door, looking at the bike you love more than anything, knowing that anything is possible, whether it's keeping it on the road forever or turning it into something that's never been on the road before. Because with eBay, your garage just got a whole lot bigger. Get all the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Now back to my conversation with Michael Uhlarik. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. My father used to watch those ads, the moody ads that would, a couple getting into their Delta 88, in the half light off for a dinner, and she has a gown on, and he's got a tux, and he was always like, how much spaces are in the trunk? And, is there a proper spare tire? Not one of those goddamn space saver spare tires. And, what's the mileage? And, what are the maintenance intervals? He kind of went to extremes and to prove a point, but it's true. It seems that we have an aversion to actually communicating useful information, like fuel mileage, or like what kind of fuel do you have? I have as you know, a Volkswagen GTI, and I have to burn premium fuel. And when the fuel prices spiked, they've come down now, but it was an extra 50 cents a liter.
Yeah.
So little things like that you don't think of, are really significant. And it seems like we have an aversion. It seems like marketing people have an aversion to just saying something factual.
Well, and they do and they don't. Like, the latest Apple ad campaign is this dramatic dramatized black and white series. One of them is black and white, some of them are color, but it shows students, because they're aiming at students, at like high schoolers buying their first, laptop for college. And they're tongue in cheek, they're, the woman saying, you won't be able to get your message because your phone isn't allowed in the library. And the girl's very flippant, this Gen Zer. She just goes, it's okay, I've mirrored my phone on my laptop. It's a Mac. Another one, the guy's like, you'll never download that huge uncompressed video. And he goes, we have AirDrop because it's a Mac. So it's fun. It's beautifully produced. It's overproduced. It's a cheeky thing. It's got all the hallmarks of American marketing, and yet they're still telling you something useful. Hey, there's this feature, for those of you who maybe don't know, that allows you to share large files without any special equipment. So it is possible. American marketers are good at this. I don't lay the blame on the marketers. I lay the blame on the people at American motorcycle importers and companies who are responsible for hiring marketers and for laying the direction. Like, enough with the guitar music, like the electric guitar, guy driving on a desert highway. Like, really? And then you wonder why nobody under the age of 200 wants to buy your motorcycle. Like, I'm 200, but I still remember how other products used to be marketed. And luckily in this role, I get to travel and see other ways of promoting motorcycling, which are way more fresh and frankly, just more effective.
Do you think that part of that is that because in the West we are so disassociated from motorcycles for any practical usage that
Totally.
that's the sort of the root of the malaise, is that nobody really knows what motorcycles are used for, or seemingly, because it's like, if they don't know even what people are looking for when they look at a motorcycle, because there's such a disconnect. If in ADV riders forums, there's always, there's some whack jobs in there, it must be said, but for the most part, guys like you, for the most part, it's people just like, well, how do you get those bags on that bike, or how did you deal with that shock that collapses because it's a $10 shock from Honda or Yamaha or whatever on a bike like the CRF 300, like upgrades, and there's a lot of sensible practical stuff, and then yet the marketing for those bikes is just is extremely the opposite, isn't it? And it seems like there should there not be some kind of middle ground that incorporates both?
Well, I lay the blame squarely on the term power sports.
I hate that word. God, I hate that word. We're motorcyclists. We're not power sportists.
Yes. And I've been unsuccessful in finding the origin of that, but it is uniquely American. Nowhere else on the earth, and I've practiced this craft all over, like 4 continents, do you hear anything related to that? It is motorcycling. Okay, it is a motor vehicle. It is registered with a governmental body, a Department of Motor Vehicles. You need a license. You need insurance. It is not an ATV. It is not an outboard engine. It is not a snowmobile. It is not something you tow. A dirt bike, sure, but it's a motorcycle, and we've been making them for 130 years. And the reality is that somewhere in the 90s, American marketeers came up with this idea, mostly probably to package this new dealer model, which was the floor plan. Used to be the mom and pop bike shop in every community, and you had the official dealer, but even the official dealer was, your local neighbor got a concession to retail brand XYZ, and they had to abide by certain things, and they get certain promotional, materials, but it was pretty low key. And that's as recently as the early 90s. And then in the 90s became this corporatized dealer structure where companies like Harley-Davidson outright said, all right, it's like McDonald's. You're going to put in this much amount of money. This is exactly what the building has to look like, down to like the color. The paint has to be this paint made by this manufacturer with this color, and this kind of lighting, and you have to do this and you have to do that, and you have to finance this multi-million-dollar floor plan of product. And okay, it was good. It provided a lot of entrepreneurs, small business owners, the ability to run a business all year round. You could sell the outboard motors and the motorcycles in the summer, and then the lawn equipment and the snowblower and the snowmobile in the winter. Great. But when we do this for 25 years and we, in parallel to this, completely ignore the idea that this is transportation with a fun angle and not a toy with a transportation side gig, then we totally eliminated youth market. Not today, not in 2025. We eliminated the youth market in 1995. And I know because I was there. I was a young, Gen X, straight out of college, wanted to get a motorcycle. And already then the dealer experience sucked, and it sucked everywhere, uniformly in North America, in Canada and the US. You had a couple of good mom and pops, but increasingly it became this thing where it was like, you came in there, it was intimidating, and they pushed you to the higher value motorcycle because the dealer made margin, and they were obsessed with margin because they had to make the payment to the manufacturer to cover this fucking huge floor plan. And I mean, it's come to a head. Polaris dealers are starting to push back really hard this week on the mothership. Harley dealers have successfully sued the mothership. There's been some bad practices at Triumph, at BMW, where they're shoving too many products into dealer hands. The dealers have to sell this stuff or their profit margin evaporates. All of this has contributed to this ever escalating fight for margin. You make a lot of profit margin on a Harley-Davidson Street Glide. What's the margin on that Honda CRF? $300?
It's not very much, is it?
And that's taken up a lot of space and just as much PDI, at the beginning. And that Honda, unlike the Street Glide, won't be back for many years. So you're not going to make any money on repair. So the whole system is really corrupted by an outlook which says this is a toy, it's recreation, just like the outboard motors. And so you have this crazy cycle that I have lived 3 times, twice in North America, where Polaris Industries and Bombardier Recreational Products, it's right there in the name, recreational products, when interest rates are low and times are good, everyone's buying 3 Evinrude 225 horsepower outboards to put on the transom of their bass boat, because apparently to fish, you need to go 100 miles an hour on the water.
Fish move more quickly than they used to. It's true.
Yes, that's true. But then, suddenly you have a crash and it's like, we got to let go of 10,000 people. And, the dealers are stuck with 2 years of inventory, KTM. And, here we are again. And so when I look at this list, Honda, number 1, number 3, Yamaha, number 5, number 4, Kawasaki, number 7, Suzuki, number 8. What does this tell me? Just make good products that appeal to people on a large scale. You can commute on that Ninja. You can commute on that DRZ. You can, justify it for $6,000. A young person who's sort of interested in motorcycling can ride that CRF in inclement weather, and it'll bring him or her home. And if they drop it, it's not going to cost a fortune to fix. It's just basic business principles. Make things people want at a price they're willing to pay. And right now, the Japanese and the Chinese are the only ones doing it, and the Indians. And when I see, maybe they're popping champagne corks at BMW Motorrad USA, we sold 9,000 GS in 2024. And how many of your 300cc bikes did you sell?
The brands, other than the Japanese that you just mentioned, the top 10, of course, are Harley-Davidsons. Now, Harley is in a deep funk. Everyone sort of knows that. Everyone agrees on that. Even the company itself has admitted that they have issues. So they're still selling relatively well. They're in the top 10.
Sure.
Why is the company in such dire straits if their motorcycles seem, at least on the surface, to be selling reasonably well? What's going on there?
Well, I mean, they operate in one market. Their international sales have completely collapsed. And their domestic sales have shrunk significantly. Harley was number one for decades. Number one in terms of the number one best-selling individual model, sometimes number 2 and 3 as well, and always number one in market share. And then they started playing, statistic games about 2015 onwards. We're the number one best-selling motorcycle in America, star asterisk, in the heavyweight category, which they defined themselves. It's not an industry category. There's no heavyweight category.
You got to go to box. You got to go to boxing for that.
Yeah, right. And if they meant mass, then yeah, they're the number one still. In terms of vehicle mass. But they defined it as 600 cc and plus until the Japanese started selling a lot of 650s, which had nothing to do with Harley, and 700 cc's, and then suddenly heavyweight category was 650 and then 700. They would do these things in their press releases back in 2018, 19. We're the best-selling motorcycle brand among youth. And you're like, okay, how do you define that? Again, on road, 650 cc and above, and you're just like, okay, whatever. I mean, I am the best. I'm the most successful motorcycle industry professional in Nova Scotia. Like, wow.
That's because you killed the other guy.
I killed the other guy. They'll never find him.
They'll never find him.
He's at the bottom of the cove. So the answer to your question is, they don't make products people want at a price they're willing to pay as much as they used to. European sales have been, collapsing. And that's not hyperbole. When you're losing double-digit percentages year over year, that's a collapse. That's not we've got a bit of a dip. And then even here, like in the top 10, they got 3 bikes in the top 10. Great. But they're no longer going to be they once upon a time, not long ago, sold, 300,000 vehicles just in the US. They're going to be lucky to break 120, 115, 120K this year. Still a good business. But if you're negative every year, then the math is the math. This is public knowledge. They publish their sales figures every year for 11 years. It's going down. So,
but companies can scale up manufacturing, right? Why does it seem? If it seems, what am I trying to say? If they can scale up manufacturing, can they not downscale manufacturing effectively, or is that a difficult thing to do?
That's the plan. That's the plan that's been publicized by the current CEO and the current board, that they wanted to make Harley-Davidson more elite, believe it or not, that they wanted to deliberately reduce volume in order to preserve profitability, i.e. sell fewer bikes, but with, amazing markups. And that would be a great plan. Except that the market is now flooded with a lot of nearly new, very low mileage secondhand Harleys that are competing for new bikes. And, if ride what you like. I'm not a Harley guy. I do think, I don't know why I feel the need to say this. I do like the XR 750. I think it's one of the most beautiful motorcycles ever made. I think the Sportster has something to it. I ride what makes you happy. That said, the bikes are essentially unchanged for something like 30 years. And their attempts to make new vehicles have all flopped. The Livewire is a disaster. The Pan American, those who have it and love it, great, wonderful. But it's been a failure from a business standpoint. They haven't made the sales needed to recoup the cost. There isn't going to be another one. There's going to be a 750. There's going to be a 500. That's a dead end. So yeah, you can scale down manufacturing, but you still need to be revenue positive. And the only way they've been able to do this, if you look at their books, is they just keep cutting. They're cutting Livewire. They're cutting R&D. They're letting go people. They're closing down a factory. They're reducing overseas operations. At some point, what is left to cut? They're now leasing out a big chunk of the Harley-Davidson campus in Milwaukee. They're getting rid of property. That is usually a bad sign for a business.
I do believe they're getting rid of some of their buildings too. I think it was not a whiskey manufacturer. I think it was.
Something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. A good drink always helps you through the hard times. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. Michael, we all know that statistics and numbers and sales and anything else like that can always be skewed to favor anyone who wants to gain anything from the numbers. But looking behind the numbers, what do you see behind this when you apply your years of toiling in the trenches to these numbers? Is there anything hidden within it?
Yeah, I see a lot of good news. So the good news is that the strong and healthy motorcycle companies of the world are showing evidence of strength and health in the United States, which is 1.2% of the world motorcycle market in terms of volume, but is still double digits percent in terms of revenue. American market matters, and there's a lot wrong. There's reform that is required to make American motorcycling great again, to make it attractive, to make it attractive to people, to make it attractive to ordinary people, to expand the tent. And when I see the CRF, particularly that, but also the Rebel, also the Ninja 400, what that is selling in these double digit, 15,000, 12,000, 10,000 units a year, what it says to me is it's very democratizing. These are affordable products by high quality companies. And what's not said, what's not on this list, and I know for a fact, and I think most ADV podcast followers will know this anecdotally, there is an incredible number of really fun, really affordable motorcycles that are not street legal, that are being enjoyed. And when you ride a bike on the dirt, on the farm, down the trail, in the woods, in the pits, just on your private property, you're very likely to transition into being a road-going motorcyclist. And the Japanese factories know this. So it's not just the number of off-road bikes that are being sold, which is a known quantity. It's the stuff like Suron and Talaria and all the Alibaba, Amazon electric off-road motorcycles that are $4,000, $5,000. Some of them are good. A lot of them are not. But what's the difference between this and 1968, 1972, when someone got a Wombat Combat? And for all the nostalgia, it was not a well-made motorcycle, and you couldn't get parts. And there were a bunch of other weird Japanese motorcycles, Hakoda and, whatever, and weird Italian brands that, some guy brought in or Sears brought in and we never saw again. And it whet people's appetite. Maybe that first experience wasn't great. The product was unreliable or it broke quickly, but they got excited. And then they go from that to a CRF or to a YZ or to a Harley. So I see a lot in the data that suggests that we're on the cusp of a rebirth. People want low-cost transportation that is also fun. You talked about fuel, whether it's leaving electric vehicles out, just combustion gasoline motorcycles. A single-cylinder 300, 400, 500cc motorcycle can crisscross America, no problem, at highway speed, no problem, and can do it more economically than any car, including a Tesla. So, you fill up the tank of your off-brand, Chinese motorcycle, and maybe it isn't perfect, but you can do the things you love doing and get around your life for $10 a week and have fun. So the data to me is showing that we're past the valley. We're emerging. We're starting to see motorcycle sales uptick in the US for a whole new generation of people who are looking at it and going, this is fun. And this is a great way to get around.
But back to the notion of marketing. There seems to be a paradox, because I was reading something by Peter Egan a while ago, and when he was a young lad, he and a buddy set out, and I think they had 160 Hondas. 160,
Was this
200.
just after the Civil War? I'm a little
just after the Civil War. The smoke
Yeah.
had cleared, but just. And they rode, I think, from
Put down his muscle.
they rode from the Midwest, and I think they did something ridiculous, like Gaspé Peninsula in eastern Canada, on these little motorcycles, and they didn't think anything of it. And the paradox part of this is that motorcycles today are better than ever.
More reliable, more stable.
Yeah. A Ninja 400 is a fast bike on a racetrack with very little modification. A Ninja 400 with a quick kit on it, you'd be shocked at how fast those things could go. People would be stunned. And there are some tracks that I've been to where the Ninja 400 kids are kicking the ass of guys with Ducatis because they're that good. And yet, and here's the part that's peculiar about this whole dynamic is that, we're convinced that to set off on a 500 or 600 mile journey, you need a large touring motorcycle.
Yeah, look, I don't know if this is an American marketing
misstep. I mean, it could be anything else.
It's not just a misstep. I think it's malfeasance. I think that we have, in the name of, like, I get it. I get paid by corporations too. So, we're in a for-profit business, and I'm all for profit. I'm very much a capitalist. But I think it's immoral, and I'm using that language. I think it's immoral that we have, as a society, convinced 40-50% of the American population that a crew cab pickup truck is a completely reasonable family car. That sinking $60,000-$70,000 for a working class person to finance $70,000 to drive a inefficient, unsafe, heavy, crude vehicle jammed full of cheap luxury items like heated seats and some LED lights to make them feel special. I think it's a crime against, I think it's class warfare. I think we've hung this noose of incredible debt around the necks of people, and you say, "Oh, it's a free country. No one made you buy that, Ram 1500." The ad campaigns are Nazi propaganda level skill, telling you for 15-20 years that you're not a real man unless you haul big, unless you show up with your buddies at the hockey game and step down out of a vehicle so big that it needs a footboard to climb into. And the motorcycle equivalent is the nonsense that BMW has done. I'm glad BMW Motorrad is around, and the GS saved the company. So yay, GS. But, ADV Rider is full of stories of people going around the world on single-cylinder, air-cooled Japanese motorcycles. Why is that? Why are they not going around the world on their KTM, BMW, Moto Morini, Pan America, $25,000 Luxo barge? Because it's a touring motorcycle that has some off-road capability because engineering. It's stupid. And I wish people would take the advice of some really great members of the ADV forum who say, sell the GS, sell the Panigale, buy a DRZ, and spend the $10,000 you've saved on a trip and actually go. Take the 6 months off, the 6 weeks off, and say, I'm going to lose some money. It's going to be hard on my career, but this could change my life. And I'm going to ride my boring, unsexy Japanese KLR to Mexico and meet my family there and then have a great vacation. That would be so much better for Kawasaki. That would be so much better for the dealers. It would be better for BMW. It would be better for everybody if we just stopped selling luxury goods and started selling adventure. And adventure starts with a 125cc motorcycle. This story. I've told this story on this pod. My greatest motorcycle journey was on a 125 two-stroke. And I bet that's true. Some version of that a small bike, a crappy bike, a stolen bike, a borrowed motorcycle, a rented motorcycle. I bet 90% of the people who've been riding for 10 plus years will tell you the same story. It's not that the best ride was on the amazing bike you bought when you got your Christmas bonus. It was that ride where you were in the journey and not about the hardware. So yeah, I have strong feelings about that.
In closing words from eBay Motors. Picture this, you're halfway through a DIY motorcycle fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. Well, it's okay because, whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything, brake rotors, lights, and tire exhaust systems, whatever you need. And it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Thank you for listening to The Lowdown Show.